Sometimes when there's a primary action that you want users to be able to take on your website, you might want a floating action button. You've probably seen this before. It's this little button that shows in the bottom right, and it floats there. It's close to your thumb when you're on a mobile device, and that's where you'll do things like adding photos or videos, for example. So we're going to explore that component in this video. Let's create our page, Quasar, new page, components / QFab page. And then we'll open that one up. See that it's working before we dive in. There it is, and it's working. Now you might not actually need a QFab button. I'll show you what I'm talking about. If we say Q-page-sticky, this allows us to stick something onto a section of our page, and then we give it a position here, and I'm going to put it onto the bottom right, and then let's give it an offset as well. And that's going to be equal to an array, which will give us the X and Y. So X offset of 14 and a Y offset of 14. And so that's going to create a section of the site down here that we can now hook into. And just to show that this is working, let's have a div that says working. And there it is down the bottom there. It's really easy to move stuff and fix it to certain parts of the page using Quasar. This is an awesome component that I use all the time. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. I can just use a normal Q button here and then add Fab. And that's automatically going to add Fab icon styling. So if it's a button on its own and you don't need a whole bunch of the QFab functionality that we're going to talk about in this video, you can simply add the Fab attribute, and that could save you pulling in a whole bunch of extra code for the QFab component. So let's just show this in action. Color is equal to accent. We'll use the accenting color, and then the icon, we'll set that to add. And there we go. That's a floating action button just using the normal button component. Now let's see what the QFab button can do. So I'll say Q-fab to create that. We'll give it a color that is equal to accent. In fact, it's got to be virtually the same. Icon, how about keyboard, arrow, up for the icon, and then the direction we're going to set as well equal to up. And the reason I set the direction up is because at the moment it's in the bottom right of the screen. We want the icons when we click on it to show up like this. Okay, you can also set it to the left and the right, but I'll show you what that looks like in a second. So now let's dive in here and create some buttons that will show up when this is clicked. Q-fab-action. And in here, we can just create another button that's got an icon of photo, and let's give it a color equal to blue. So there we go. If we click on this now, we have that showing up. And the reason I added direction up here is look at what happens if I get rid of it. It now shows on the right side, which doesn't really work because we can't see it. So you can set the direction to wherever you like it. We'll also create another one. How about a video? So they have the option to add a photo or a video, and we'll use red for that. And there we go. Oh, video. It has to be video cam for that icon. Cool. So that's how easy it is to create a floating action button using Quasar. But of course, we have a whole bunch of other functionality that's available to us, and we're going to cover that now. So we can add a label here. This could be, for example, add, and that's going to show up there. We can also add labels onto these buttons here. So how about the first one will be equal to photo, and then this one I'll set it to video. And there we go, add a video or add a photo. We can change the position of this label by saying label-position. And if we set that, for example, to the left side, at the moment it's on the right, save that, and now it flips over to the left. But we've also got top and bottom there as well. So that's good to know, and these work with your Fab action buttons as well. See, we can do that with the action buttons. All right, so back to normal again. We can also make it so that these labels are hidden. I'll show you what I mean. If I come down here and I say hide-label, it's going to be hidden. Let me just refresh the page here. And perhaps we actually have to set that to the value true. Yeah, there we go. So that's going to hide the label. So why would you want to do that? The reason you might want this to be dynamic is sometimes on a mobile device, you might not want to show the labels, so you just have some extra space. But then on a desktop device, you might want to actually show those labels. So let me give you an example of that. if we come down here and we say computed, we can have show label, and then we'll return this $$Q, so our global Quasar object, and then platform, and then is, and then mobile. If the platform is mobile, we don't actually want to show it, then we want to hide the label. So I can copy that now, come up here, and now we're going to hide the label if we are on a mobile device. Save it, it shows, but then if I go to a mobile device and refresh the page, now that's going to hide the label. So that's good to know. We also have control over how these labels are aligned. So at the moment they're centered, so they will be centered by default. And let me just push them out a little bit more. There we go. So by default they're centered, but we can also say vertical dash action dash align and set it to left. That's going to align them to the left, and then we can say right, which will align them to the right, which probably makes the most sense in this scenario. We can also make these labels external. So at the moment they're sitting inside the button, but then you can go ahead and say external label, and that means it will sit on the outside. So let me just come in here, refresh the page. I want to get that label back for this one. Here we go. So when it's external label, it only shows when you've actually clicked on it. And notice that the label is showing to the right now. Well, we can say label dash position and set that to left. So now that external label is going to show up on the left there. And let's add those ones to the fab icons as well. So I just copied that and I'll paste it in there. So they've both got external labels and they'll both have an external label on the left. Oh, messed that up a bit. And there we go. Cool. All right, so that's another way that you can show what the name of it is. And we can even come in and change the class and the style of those labels. So let's come into this fab action, this fabulous action button, and say label-class is equal to background blue. And maybe add some padding in there as well. So let's have a look at that. Yeah, there we go. I think that looks pretty good. And then you can do the same thing for the video, but we'll make it red. Yeah, there we go. So we have total control over those labels. And if we want, we can also say label-style. And you might want to change the font size, for example. Font size is equal to 1.4 EMs. And I'll copy paste that one down here. And just gives us a bigger font size for that label. Another thing we can do is hide this icon here. So if I come up here and bring that label back, so the label is equal to add. Let's get rid of external label so it comes back in there. Yeah, and now we can say hide dash icon. So there might be situations where you want to switch the icon on and off, depending on the platform, for example. So we've got that available to us. We can also change the padding. And there's actually 3 ways you can change the padding. We can change it for all. So if I say extra small here, it means the padding all around is going to be extra small. If I give it a second value, then extra small will be the Y padding, and then the next value will be the X padding. This is actually really handy because usually the X and Y padding is going to be the same. So top and bottom is extra small, right and left is medium padding. But then the other thing you can do is set every single one, starting from the top and then going clockwise. So top is small, right is small, bottom is small, left is large. Let's try that. Yeah, so only the left has got that larger padding. So we can do that as well. We can also make it square, and we can also make it glossy. So a lot of typical button type stuff. And that's actually everything. But one more thing I wanted to do before finishing this video is something they do in the docs is they make it so that you can actually drag this button around. And I thought that was really cool. So I'm just going to quickly run through how they did that. So if we're going to offset here, we can make this a dynamic value. So let's set that to fab position. I'll copy that and then come down here. And how about we add a data property in here? Return an object. And then we can say fab position by default is equal to, how about 32, 32? Save that. And there we go. Now the fab position is a dynamic value. And we're also going to want to know whether or not it's dragging, because if it's dragging, we want to make it so that you can't click on the button, just because that might mess with things a little bit. So let's say dragging fab, so dragging the fab action button, and we'll set that to false. So come up here. By default, it's going to be false, but when it's dragging, it will be true. So now let's say disable. And there we go. So if this is dragging, make the button disabled. What else do we need to do? Actually, coming back up here, we also need to make it so that we can detect whether or not it's dragging or not. So if we say v-touch, so if this is being touched and it's panning, which means we're moving it around, I want you to prevent the default action. I'm going to take control of this, and we'll make this a mouse event, and we're going to call move fab. So that's going to be a method that we can play around with. And let's come in here and say methods, move fab, and I might pull the event out of there and just console.log it. Console.log event. There we go. All right, so if I try and drag this now, we get that event logged. And one thing I want you to notice is that if I go to the very first event, come down here, is first is set to true. So we can see whether or not it's the first event. And if I come to the bottom here, is final is set to true. So we can also see if it's the final dragging event. That's going to be helpful to us in a second. So I just wanted to point it out. Now let's write the code for this. We can say this dot dragging fab. And how do we know if it's dragging? Well, if event dot is first is not equal to true, so if it's not the first event, and event.is final is not equal to true, then that is considered to be dragging. Okay, so let's come down here, because the first moment that you click on it, that very first event, that is not what I would consider a dragging event. It hasn't actually started dragging. And the moment you let go, it is also no longer dragging. So that's a very honest, accurate way of checking whether or not this button is dragging. What else? We can say this dot fab position. So we're going to change the position now as they drag it. And we'll set it to the current position. And then the first value in there is going to be the X position. And then we'll subtract event.delta.x. So what that's actually doing is it's checking the distance that it's traveled, and it's subtracting that from its current location. And so we'll do that for the Y value as well. Okay, so the first value, the X value, has been set, and then the Y value has been set. And now let's see if that actually works. How cool is that? We have a draggable button, and I can click on this to open it and close it still. So you might add some functionality so that when you open it, this doesn't like bleed over the edges. But yeah, I think that's really, really awesome. Thank you, Quasar, for making this so ridiculously simple. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it for you. As I always do, I love building this stuff. In the next video, we're going to start diving into form components, which is just a whole new world on its own. And I'm really excited for it. There's so much cool stuff to show you. So I'll talk to you then.